Good morning. My name's Jim Rowder, R-O-W-A-D-E-R, and I'm the city attorney. And I just wanted to take a moment to remind everybody that our weekly media briefings are intended to provide information and updates for the public on matters external to the trial underway across the street. We are committed to sharing information about public safety and providing guidance to residents and businesses. And let me be clear, we will not be providing any comments related to questions about the trial proceedings underway across the street or recent settlement in the civil lawsuit.
So I'm going
to turn it over to Mayor Fry.
That includes the timing in the middle of jury selection? Zero. We'll hear nothing.
We'll answer the question.
Yeah.
As soon as we're done. We'll bring it right back.
Guys, it's the biggest question.
Well,
Bring up the trial.
Let's be respectful.
Let them until the end as we have the presentation.
So we will be answering questions as soon as we are done with some of the initial comments. Some of the initial comments, I think, will answer the questions that you will have afterwards preemptively. We're going to be entirely transparent about every bit of this to the extent we can, and we're not under some form of court order or court direction. But let us please get through a number of the other issues that we also have to handle first. So about a month ago, you saw a number of individuals standing with me here today deliver a plan regarding 38th in Chicago. And that plan called for increased city services, bolstered in every way, from snow clearance to street maintenance to, yes, law enforcement. That plan was also very intentionally flexible to allow us to change as circumstances changed. Indeed, circumstances have changed. The George Floyd Square, the area surrounding 38th and Chicago, has multiple truths to it. It is a truth that this is a very important location of racial justice and healing. This is a location where we want to honor George Floyd's legacy, memorializing it on a permanent basis. This is also a location that has been subject to an increasing level of violence. There have been individuals and groups located at this intersection that are not celebrating the life of George Floyd, that are not honoring racial justice and healing and the very intention that this intersection has laid out from day one. Instead, they've caused violence. Neighborhoods have been terrorized. It is unacceptable in every way, shape, and form. And yesterday, our Chief Arredondo, in conjunction with a number of different law enforcement partners ranging from Hennepin County sheriffs to FBI, to FTA, and of course, the U.S. attorneys, laid out a plan to provide additional protection and safety to the surrounding neighborhoods with an increased law enforcement approach, predominantly through police overtime from MPD. Additionally, we've had instituted a prosecutorial arm in the form of the U.S. attorneys to ensure those that are terrorizing neighborhoods will indeed be held accountable and will be arrested. So that is a part of the plan that has already been issued. Again, that plan allowed for additional flexibility because we knew that it was possible that circumstances have changed, and in fact, they have. And so our full team is continuing to work together. We're meeting very regularly with department leaders. Although law enforcement is certainly an important component of the approach, and there are additional supplemental assets that are added from community presence to outreach, to the navigators we have in the area. Yes, law enforcement is certainly an important component of it. With respect to the timeline, Chief Arredondo, myself, Council Vice President Jenkins, Councilmember Cano, we're evaluating that timeline every single day and ensuring that we have the right resources on the ground and ready to be put into action in order to ensure safety at this intersection and a continued place of racial justice and healing. As has been noted previously, we've also laid out plans that we want to see implemented through our Public Works Department to push out a bump out on the northeast corner of the intersection, which is the location where George Floyd was killed, to make sure the tires never roll over that location again. And in order for our public works crew to get in there and to make those improvements safely so that we can have a permanent memorial for George Floyd, it's essential that we have officers and the right resources that are present with them. So that's a rundown on 38th and Chicago. I know there are a number of other questions that you will also have. As I've continued to say, we will continue to provide these very regular updates to the press and the media. We've also done quite a bit of outreach to community, several times a day, in fact, to make sure that they have all of the information intelligence on the ground so that we have these two-way streams of communication back and forth as this trial progresses. So with that, I will turn it over to our Chief Arredondo, and then to, I believe, Director Cotton, and following that, we're going to open up to any questions you might have. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. Before I give just a snapshot of Operation Safety Net while the trial is still ongoing, on behalf of myself, Mayor Fry, the Minneapolis Police Department, just want to send our prayers and thoughts with the communities in Atlanta. The horrific scene that those first responders had to deal with the previous day, it's just sad and it's heartbreaking. We will continue as a city to reach out and be in support of our Asian American community members, and I want them to know that we will continue to be here for you. And so I just want to give our thoughts and prayers to the communities down there in Atlanta. As the trial is ongoing, all of you are aware that Operation Safety Net, the planning and preparation for First Amendment rights peacefully and security and peace in our city, those plans are still ongoing. And I want to also just thank again our communities for their civic participation. And no reports of any arrests, damage to property, or destruction has been reported as a result of the trial, and so that again is thanks to our communities out there who know that we as a city can do that, do it right. The world is watching, and I just really want to say thank you again to our communities out there who are participating peacefully in any sorts of demonstrations or gatherings. As the mayor indicated, 38th in Chicago. It is my responsibility to make sure that I'm working in concert with our Unified Command leaders and our subject matter experts to present plans and options for the mayor to review. And I will make sure that I'm providing him the best, safest, efficient, and most effective plans for his review that obviously take into account the community. We will continue to be there to restore hope and security and safety for them. I also, as the mayor indicated, want to thank our federal partners yesterday who have joined with us as a city to bring in additional resources to hold those accountable who would dare try to harm any section of our city, but specifically we have seen an increase in violence in and around the 38th and Chicago area. So I want to thank our U.S. Attorney, our Special Agent in Charge, FBI and ATF, Sheriff Hutchinson of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office as well. And so with that, I will turn it over to Director Sasha Cotton.
Thank you, Chief. I'm Sasha Cotton, the Director of the Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention. We are encouraged and inspired to be continuing to work with community as our city goes through the trial. We are currently reviewing applications that were released, and the application process ended yesterday for community patrols to do engagement on the ground with communities throughout the course of the trial and continuing through the summer months. We are currently reviewing applications. 17 applications were received in total from a diverse pool of from organizations from a diverse pool of different kinds of programs. And we look forward to spending the $1 million that the city has contributed, really investing in community groups that can do this kind of patrol work in the diversity of our city. We're currently doing the review process and are hoping that we can release the names of the organizations that have been selected in the coming week, and hoping that we can set up contracts so that organizations can begin to do that work on or around March 29th. I believe that that is all I have, and I will turn it back over to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cotton. Thank you for your work. We'll open it to questions.
The city said it doesn't think the Floyd settlement alone will result in a tax increase. How much are you pinning on that word alone? Is it likely people could see an increase because of that and other settlements or PTSD claims?
So the question from Liz is, we had made the statement previously that the Floyd settlement alone won't result in a tax increase, and that is accurate. But obviously, there does come a point where a significant, when significant monies are spent or provided, yes, there is an impact. We aren't there yet.
Mayor, this settlement has clearly had a negative effect on the criminal trial, at least selecting a jury. Why didn't you wait until after the criminal proceedings were over?
So first, I would disagree with the underlying premise.
They kicked two jurors out,
So
Mayor.
I would disagree with the underlying premise. But I'll pass this off to Mr. Rauter, our city attorney. I'll note that we are required to listen to the court on what we are able to and not able to say with regard to criminal proceedings. Our city and myself, we will continue to do that. As you'll note, we have not commented on the evidence, nor have we commented on the criminal proceedings, and we will continue to do exactly that. With regard to the settlement, we got very clear recommendations from our attorneys, given their legal expertise. And I'll note that it was a unanimous decision coming from a council with many diverse standpoints and backgrounds. Jim?
Yeah, thank you. And I would underscore what the mayor just said about the underlying premise, I think, is certainly remains to be seen, but to date, I would say it hasn't had that impact. With regard to timing in general, there is no good timing to settle any case, particularly one as complex and as involved and sensitive as this. There's no guarantee, for instance, that that deal would be available 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks from now or 6 months from now. And we decided to move forward with the Floyd family when all was said and done.
Hold on a second. What legal advice did you give them? I mean, first of all, I'm sorry, that's one question, but first of all, it's obviously had an impact on the criminal trial. 2 jurors were kicked off, and all of them said they've heard this $27 million settlement, so it's impacted at least a couple of the jurors' objectivity. 99% of these happen after a criminal trial, if I'm not mistaken. So my question is, I mean, you're standing up there saying it didn't have an impact. It has. It's a fact. Why do it early?
Again, I disagree with the underlying premise. I also think it's important to make clear that we are following the judge's instructions and certainly are not willing to speak about events happening in that criminal trial, in that courtroom. It would be inappropriate. I don't think the judge would like us to say one way or the other about the issues you raised that are happening in the trial right now.
Mr. City Attorney, you had a 90-minute press conference last week about this settlement.
And we did not talk about the criminal trial in our press conference.
Okay, then, with respect, aside from the criminal trial, can you talk about the settlement, just the settlement, and why you wanted to release it and announce it prior to selecting a jury?
I think it's also clear from the judge's comments this week that he does not want us to talk about the settlement at this time while they are finishing jury selection. So for that reason alone, we're not going to talk about details related to the settlement. Also, from a practical standpoint, the settlement is still in the process of being finalized, effectuated. It's going to need to go through federal court approval. Until that process is complete, that would also make it very inappropriate to talk about details related to the settlement.
Did you go to Chief Judge Barnett Cahill?
We're going to need to take another question.
I'm sorry can I just ask a couple questions about George Floyd Square? I'm curious about just more detail, Mayor Fry, about, oftentimes we hear, oh, we're going to increase patrols in the area. Sure. There's going to be more law enforcement in the area. Some people are having trouble understanding how that's going to be helpful. And then what happens if there's some sort of altercation or incident between police and people who are there? Who takes responsibility for that and the way that things have gone on so far?
Well, I'll call the chief up to answer that question. He can provide some specifics as to what the additional presence will look like and how it will be felt in the surrounding neighborhoods. I think it's a fair question. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. To your question, what impact or what additional police presence at the 30th and Chicago area would look like? What specifically could be a result if, in fact, community were to have a confrontation with public safety out there at that area. So one, and I've said this from the very beginning, and it's not just the perspective from public safety, but it's also from listening over several months since last year to the community that's out there. And some of those comments have been made public. The people are hurting. They need that intersection reopened. The best public safety remedy right now is to open up and get that intersection flowing again. The other reason for that is I'm a firm believer that public safety is just part of an ecosystem, a larger ecosystem. The people over there, we need transit. Many rely upon the public transportation system. We need transit open again. We need people to have a restoration of hope over there. I would hope that when we start to engage in, with community in reopening up that intersection, that individuals, while they absolutely have a right to maybe be upset, maybe not be happy with it, but I would hope that they would not resort to any sort of criminal conduct or physical confrontation with officers. That is not what we want, and so we hope that doesn't occur. Obviously, if that were to occur, individuals have to be held accountable if they're assaulting police officers. But again, this has been conversations over several months. Myself, Director Cotton, I have to just extend a great deal of gratitude and thanks for her. It has been very intentional in meeting with community over there. Many of the community voices have said every day that that intersection stays closed, they are feeling more harm, they are feeling more stress, their anxiety levels are going up. And so from a wellness and a health standpoint, we also have to open up that intersection.
We have time for one more question. Go ahead, Liz.
No, I'll let her finish hers.
I'm so sorry. Another concern that some community members have raised to me and to everyone is just that I think recently there was a person killed by the name of Wanye Corey, very close to the 4th precinct. And some people have said, why should we trust police presence to be helpful if they haven't been really responding to things so far, is the perception, especially at George Floyd Square, but also some incidents that have happened close to precincts in the city.
So the question is, why should some community members feel, why should they trust that additional police presence will...
Are they going to do their job? Are they going to help out? Or are they going to stay away because it's this autonomous zone and they don't want to engage? How is that going to work?
No, we want, and our officers will continue to engage. We still have been responding to calls in and around that area. Obviously, the environmental structure that's currently in place can make it very challenging. But whether it's the 4th precinct or the 3rd precinct, our folks are still going to respond. But in order for us to effectively and give a timely response, we have to open up that intersection specific to 38th in Chicago. And I also just, again, we have, like you mentioned, the 4th precinct, 3rd precinct. We are still dealing with a significant violent crime issue from last year, and we're trying to make sure that we can make a dent in that as we get into the warmer weather months. We are down in terms of personnel, as I know you're aware. We're relying upon the collaboration of a lot of the help from Office of Violence Prevention, community groups out there, whether it be Mother's Love or for Mother's Love. We have folks over in the Little Earth community who patrols that are helping as well to keep neighborhoods safe. And so it's going to take a collaborative effort and mutual aid. Again, whether it's Chief Frizzell of the Metro Transit Police or the Sheriff Hutch's team's helping us out. But we're going to continue to show up to be in spaces to keep our communities safe, and we're going to work in collaboration with those communities.
Chief, is this still a post-Chauvin
That's right.
trial?
Here's
Is this still a post-Chauvin trial effort to open 38th in Chicago?
I'm sorry, Liz was up next. Thank you.
She
We've
had a
got-
question.
okay.
I thought it'd be my turn.
And I'm sorry.
She had
again,
different-
I wasn't
Yeah.
here yesterday with your press conference. Is this 38th in Chicago idea still a post-Chauvin trial reopening?
Oh, the question is the reopening in terms of basically the timeline. Is it something that will occur after the trial date? We are not going to, and I've been in daily conversations with the mayor, and as he has stated, and as I agree with him wholeheartedly, we are not going to let the trial dictate when it's the right time to safely open up that intersection. And so we are not, the plans that I will be presenting to Mayor Fry will not be based upon the trial timeline.
Thank you.
It's going to be based on that public safety need.
One last question for Liz.
Chief, there was talk earlier about relying on overtime for some of this work. Do you have a cost estimate, and how does that impact your budget? Also, separately, there is some video of officers at a homeless camp this morning that has some folks in the community troubled. Have you seen that? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the two questions, the first question was some of the extra patrols will be utilizing Minneapolis Police Department budget overtime. And so I don't have the numbers on that. We are absolutely tracking that. One of the reasons, again, why overtime is part of that consideration is just because, again, our resources. We don't have as many resources as we'd like to, and so we need to at least offer that option of overtime to make sure we're conducting those patrols. As for this morning's situation dealing with the encampment, from the limited video that I have seen, I was appalled by the actions of those community members that attacked my officers. I am thankful that they were not seriously injured. When I see video of individuals on top of my officers assaulting them, and some were arrested, and they should be held accountable for that. Minneapolis Police Department was not going about that alone. We were working in conjunction with other city enterprises, our health department, our CPED, and others to find adequate shelter for those individuals. Matter of fact, our officers were not even at the actual site of the encampment. They were a block away when they were confronted by these individuals, these suspects. And so I will not tolerate individuals attacking or assaulting our officers. And so I'm thankful that they did not suffer any serious injuries. We are out there, the mayor, homelessness, and trying to make sure that those experiencing homelessness have proper and adequate and rightful shelter. But we cannot start attacking public safety people to try to give them help and assistance. So.
Thanks, everyone. We're done. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can you take a few more questions, please? You just talked about transparency and the
I'll take a
effort.
couple more questions.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. First, about 38th and Chicago, Mr. Mayor. We asked the chief yesterday some of these same questions, and it seemed like it's really a discussion between you and him on when to open it back up and the community. What do you think is when is the right time for public safety to open that square back up? I mean, yeah.
I think in deciphering when the right time to open an intersection for public safety purposes, that decision, I believe, heavily rests on the chief. I trust expertise. I believe in the expertise of Chief Arredondo. He and I have been lockstep throughout. And no, I'm not budging. So, I understand that this is a very important place of racial justice and healing. I understand the importance of retaining and having the legacy of George Floyd be honored in true form. And we have an obligation, a paramount obligation as a city to keep people safe. Right now, the uptick in violence around that area is absolutely unacceptable. And I will be taking the chief's recommendation very seriously, giving it very heavy weight as it comes forward with respect to the timing itself. Go ahead.
With respect to the settlement, did you go to Chief Justice or Chief Judge Barnett to seek his opinion on this settlement prior to announcing it and its potential effect on the criminal case?
So I have not been at all involved in that as the mayor of the city of Minneapolis.
Jim?
And I don't know to what extent Jim can comment any further. But again, we've gotten very clear direction from the judge not to comment on legal proceedings, not to comment on the evidence or circumstances of the case. And we feel very strongly that the integrity of the judicial process is best upheld by us not getting involved there. As you know, the judge will be making a decision tomorrow on those very concepts, and we'll be able to determine at that point whether there are any changes or whether the trial will proceed as planned.
Mr. Raptor, you had mentioned there were still some things that need to happen in federal court regarding that settlement. Is there a timeline when you expect to have that all wrapped up?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Basically, process how we move forward on the settlement and finalizing it. The papers need to be finalized between the parties. And ultimately then it needs to, this is an active lawsuit in federal court here in Minnesota. It needs to be filed with the court, approved by the judge. Roughly a month. But some of that's not in our control. I mean, would you say that's about a rough estimate? Sorry, my colleague Brian. About a month.
Are there additional terms you're still trying to pin down? Why does it take sort of
No.
a month?
Well, one, I'm allowing for, I can't control how fast the court will do their part of that, what I just described. So I'm just trying to be prudent.
Mr. Ra-
I mean, if you really want, I mean, this is the person actually working through the documents. There's nothing sexy here, but.
Brian Carter, Assistant City Attorney. So, these types of settlements happen all, frequently in federal court, and they happen according to sort of a normal procedure. So once we have the public vote by the City Council, which is actually required to bind the city to a settlement, that public vote then binds the city and gives us, as the attorneys, the authority to go through and do all of the papers necessary to reduce the settlement agreement to a writing. And so that's what we do. We work with the other side. We get a settlement reduced to a writing. We execute that settlement, and then we file some papers in federal court that just take care of the housekeeping details to close out that case. The time frame that takes varies from case to case. I would expect in this matter we're looking on the order of a month or so. Thank you.
Mr. Rowder, my last question.
Thank you very much.
Last question, I swear. Please. You said that, for me, yeah, you said that, that the deal might not have been available after the trial. What did you mean by that?
The question is, what did I mean by saying the deal may not have been available?
Yeah.
At another time?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty clear. The bottom line is, there was no guarantees that that deal would be available at a different point in time and under different circumstances.
Meaning you might have to pay more after the trial?
It would be irresponsible for me to speculate to that. And again, I think we're getting close to talking about something that the judges over in the criminal proceeding right now would just prefer that we not discuss.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.